Peter's work is going to be exhibited in the windows at Bloomingdales for Mother's Day.
Exciting thing, first of all, because they were trying to create the windows around this sort of theme. You know, flowers. Also, they are working with the conservatory with Central Park. So Central Park donated benches also to go into the windows, which that's going to be a really exciting mixture of the floral with the landscape, and also we have some paper sculptures that are going to be displayed of insects. So I thought that really worked well with the floral design, the leaves, the foliage, the landscape, the benches, the park, tavern on the green, ladies at lunch. It was a perfect match.
Now the one thing I've seen your bugs.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word. I think they are incredible.
Yes, actually.
I love them. Since the first time I saw them, I said, wow, this guy is incredible.
Actually, I most of them I've sent already to Bloomingdales, but I did save one because I knew we were going to have this time together. So I did bring one so that you could see exactly what it looks like. Okay, this is a long-haired beetle, and it's made completely of paper, including the little tiny hairs that are on its body, is made of all paper. It was all hand-cut with scissors. And this came about how I was working in my mother's garden and my aunt's garden and her sister, and I kept seeing these unusual insects, and I thought like, oh, I really should do something with this. And so I went to my mother and I said, you know, Mom, I said, I think I'm going to do something with insects, because I had no paint. I was there spending time with my mother in California, and I said, I have no paint, I have no paper to, I have no canvas to draw on, but I do have some paper. I said, let me see what I can do. I had paper, scissors, and glue, basic things to work with, even in early childhood development.
And this is what attracted me to your work, I'll be honest with you.
Well, you know, it went from something very two-dimensional, trying to create this other dimension, and then really bringing it out. So as I would create the paintings with the landscapes behind them, and I really love landscape. So, and actually in undergraduate school I would fall asleep in the landscape. I would go out and do drawings, and I would just completely be so enamored with everything around me and the feeling of it that I would just fall asleep.
Where did you go to school? Where did you...
I went to undergraduate school at Memphis College of Art, which was a private art college at the time, but now it's more public.
Right.
But it was in Overton Park, which is in Memphis, Tennessee, where Elvis Presley was born. And so that's an interesting feeling of what's happening in the city. In California, you have the inspiration of the landscape always. So there's never a feeling of like, am I happy or how do I feel? Because you go outside and the sun is shining, it's 67 degrees all year round. Yeah. It's beautiful weather. There is no reason to frown. The light has a great effect on the landscape, and we are seeing the colors through atmospheric coloration. So it's a how can I say? It's optical illusion of color. So you're only seeing a blue because it's next to the red, or the green and next to the red that makes the blue, you know. So it really, the light plays a big part on it, and you know, where it is. So
this is so beautiful.
These are my favorite. I must say, these are my favorite.
You know, I have to say, it's such a meticulous.
You know, the funny thing is, I did sculpture in undergraduate school. I didn't do it much, you know, in studying my master's, but you know, in undergraduate school, I did, Henry Moore was my favorite sculptor.
Mm-hmm. Of course, yeah.
And his figures were very, there was a lot of movement to the form itself. So I was really driven by that.
But the attention to detail that I saw in your work,
Ah, yeah.
I said, this is the guy I need to talk to.
Yeah, very detail oriented. Detail, you can't pass me up with that. If we were in, let's say, Times Square and there was filled with people and there was someone with a blue rose on their left lapel, you could ask Peter and I can tell you where that person was. You know? So very detail oriented, and I found it very relaxing working with the paper. As opposed to like plaster or resin, other materials that you can sculpt with. I found the paper we had a great relationship. I love drawing. Bill Hicks was one of my drawing professors that really pushed me to have a relationship with the paper. So I would go out and draw the landscapes, and I was very fearful. First of all, I had a colleague, Ronnie Carruthers, who was an amazing draftsman. And he could do figures, I thought he could draw anything. And I was completely paranoid about it. But what he didn't have was the use of color. His use of color was very monochromatic. But I was like all over the place. I could use markers, I could use crayons, I could use anything you put in my hand, and I could draw with it. But you gave me a pencil, and I was just like paranoid. But then, one day, I received Prismacolor pencils as a gift, and they were soft, they blended well, and it really transferred what I was feeling into the touch of the surface. And what I mean by that, being touch of the surface, is the movement of what I was doing. I started these drawings on presentation blackboard I was working as a creative director in Far Rockaway. And I had like about a 2-hour travel to and from to work. So I was like, what am I going to do? And I was like done with reading. So I said, I'm going to work on art. Like, well, it's not about having a steady hand. It was about going with the movement. So I learned how to, the amount of pressure to put down on the surface in order to keep it moving as the train was moving. So I allowed the train's movement to guide my hand, and then of course me having the master blueprint and knowing the feeling that I wanted to exude on the surface, it really worked well. And the gradation of color, the sort of ombre of colors really worked very well through the motion of the train. And I saw people that were completely fascinated. They were just like, how can you draw on the train? Fascinating. So I like to incorporate the everydayness of life in my work. And what started to seep in even more is what we're dealing with a lot in the world today is this sort of gender bender, you know, and how that really works well. Because I've always seen beautiful figures, man and woman, that you, at a young age, even during the Elizabethan period, you couldn't tell one from the other. Well, and they actually used the young boys during the Elizabethan period as young girls.
Well, that was Shakespeare.
Absolutely. Perform. Absolutely.
So the young boys had to play all the girls.
Yes, brilliant, brilliant.
Well, you think about it.
So one of my favorite directors is Federico Fellini. You know, and he was like the master at that. The sort of like magic that happens outside the window of the home when you're having dinner at the table. You just kind of drift off. And there's this magic that happens in this whole world of majestic is like
and
just
fantasy.
brilliant. And fantasy, yeah, absolutely.
And the idea where reality and fantasy.
I really love to play with that. And that's where the color comes in. Because you're like, is this real color? And people say to me like, where did you get this color from?
But I would ask you.
Yes.
There's a work and it's not here.
Okay.
It almost looked like upside down jellyfish.
Ah, yes.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, absolutely. Those are some of my newest works. Actually, that was fascinating because I like out of the darkness into the light. And I love how, you know, we can shut our eyes and just imagine something. And it's not so dark as it is bright. So you can envision and open up to that world. So these jellyfish there was so much movement underwater, and they create their own light. There is one particular jellyfish that I've been working on that it creates its own sort of biomorphic energy of light, and that attracts its prey. It swims about 4,000 feet underwater in the abyss, and it attracts these.
So like this is total darkness, and it is the only light.
And it's the only light.
And if you were smart, you'd move away from the light because it's going to hit you.
But it really it attracts its prey through this beautiful light, and the light is so glowing and so the light is just so beautiful. It almost looks as if it's like alien-like, so we might think. Acidic colors, like really intense greens, blues, and reds. And you know what? People said to me, it's like, oh, Peter, where do you get this color from? I said, actually, nature. And I'm trying to mimic the color that I'm seeing in nature already. Nature already has these colors. These, like even the paper sculptures that I'm doing with the insects. Nature has the most fascinating insects.
Photographs are reproductions.
Absolutely.
What artists do are interpretations. It's altogether
Absolutely.
different.
And thank you for clarifying that, because a lot of people are like, do you do photorealism? And I'm like, well, you know what? That's for a photographer.
Exactly.
You can, if you need an absolute replica of this, then you take a photograph. If you want more of a feeling or an inspiration behind it, then you have an artist.
Because when an artist does this, not only do they put their own soul in it, which is incredible, but they find the universal pathos.
Absolutely.
Where everybody then can find their own soul in it. That's what real art is. To me, that's the art of quiche.
I agree.
So I love quiche though, because quiche is...
Right. And I say most of the time, if you want to know what happened during the time period, then I ask you to seek the artists that were alive during that time.
We're going to have to get together again.
Absolutely.
But for most of people who watch this, I'm 12
This
minutes
is only
enough.
beginning.
Yes,
This is only
12
the beginning.
minutes 12 minutes is long. And I feel we could talk for 2 hours. And
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed sharing the possibility of the impossible.
that's what art is, though,
Yeah.
You summed it up in a beautiful statement. I may use that as your statement to describe you, because I think that's a wonderful way to put it.
When we talk more, you will learn that the paper is really enveloping the form even more, because it's becoming part of that.
Yeah.
And we will talk more
And how
about
you
manipulating the paper is what the key is. Yeah.
I said something about a choreographer once. I asked them, how you manipulate it. And they looked at me like saying, they thought that was a bad way to put it.
Right.
But really what it means is you're in control of what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know the effect you want it to have on the people you're presenting it to. And that's what an artist is. It's a purposeful intent.
Well, I always,
goes forward.
right, absolutely. I always say I say to people, it starts with not only the idea, but the paper. Because you're going to transfer what you have in your mind onto paper. And then I can make that paper into what you see or what you imagine or what you don't even imagine through just the feeling is what happens usually when you dip the paper into water. That's where feeling happens. It starts to curl, it starts to crinkle, it starts to separate, it starts to dissipate, change colors.
Sir, I want to...
It's been a pleasure, absolutely.
It's been my pleasure. Anytime I have wine and conversation,
I know, this is the best
But
ever.
Kathleen and Hoda, really.
Well, you're more than welcome back.